The rest of the week was a flurry of preparations. Chrissy spent 3 days trying to find the perfect swimsuit, eventually settling on one that she claimed matched the color of the Pacific, but was actually more of a neon chartreuse. Janet was more practical, packing sunscreen and enough books to survive a small apocalypse. Jack, however, was preoccupied. He found himself wandering into the bistro early just to avoid the quiet moments in the apartment. He knew he felt something for Janet, something deeper than the easy friendship they built, but the fear of ruining the delicate balance of their home life was a wall he couldn't quite climb. On Friday afternoon, Laura stopped by the apartment one last time before her rehearsals began. She looked different, more confident, her eyes no longer searching for a shortcut to fame. "I heard about the beach house," she said, leaning against the counter as Jack packed his knives. "Larry told me he's facilitating a healing retreat." "He's facilitating a disaster, most likely," Jack replied, but he couldn't help but smile. "Just be careful, Jack," Laura said, her tone suddenly serious. "Larry means well, but he lives in a world where the truth is just a first draft. Don't let his scripts get in the way of your own." She kissed him on the cheek and left, leaving Jack with a sense of foreboding that not even the thought of a Malibu kitchen could shake. Chapter 17. The Malibu Mirage. The drive to Malibu was a stark contrast to the winding, claustrophobic climb into the Sierras. The Pacific Coast Highway stretched out before them, a ribbon of asphalt between the golden cliffs and the sparkling blue vastness of the ocean. "Now this is what I'm talking about," Chrissy shouted over the wind, her chartreuse swimsuit visible through the mesh of her beach bag. "Do you think they know any Broadway tunes?" "I think they mostly sing about krill." "Chrissy." Janet laughed, her hair whipping around her face in a way that made Jack's breath catch. They arrived at the house, and for once, Larry hadn't lied. It was a stunning glass and wood structure perched right on the edge of the sand. The deck was vast, the windows were floor to ceiling, and the kitchen, as promised, was a chef's dream. But as they walked through the front door, they saw a familiar sight: a pair of leopard print suitcases sitting in the entryway. "Larry," Jack said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "tell me those aren't Furley's." "Now, Jack, don't get excited," Larry squeaked, backing toward the glass door. "It turns out the business associate my boss's cousin mentioned was actually Ralph's cousin. And Ralph is house-sitting for him. But he's going to be very quiet. He's practically invisible." As if on cue, Ralph Furley emerged from the master bedroom, wearing a Hawaiian shirt so bright it could have been seen from space, and carrying a tropical drink with a tiny umbrella. "Aloha, travelers," Furley shouted, his voice echoing off the glass walls. "Welcome to my island sanctuary. I hope you brought your grass skirts, because tonight we hula." Jack looked at Janet, who was already reaching for her beach bag. He looked at Larry, who was trying to blend into the wallpaper, and then he looked at the kitchen. "Janet," Jack said, a slow, mischievous grin spreading across his face. "Yes, Jack? I think it's time we showed Mr. Furley how we do things in Santa Monica." He walked toward the stove, the weight of the past week finally lifting. Life with Larry Dallas was never going to be easy, and it was never going to be simple. But as the sun began to set over the Pacific, casting a golden glow over his friends, Jack Tripper knew that as long as they were together, even the most absurd scripts could have a happy ending. Chapter 18. The Hula and the Heat. The Malibu night was thick with the scent of salt and Furley's coconut-scented tanning oil. The glass walls of the beach house reflected the moonlight, but inside, the atmosphere was more luau gone wrong than architectural masterpiece. Ralph had managed to find a crate of plastic leis and was currently attempting to teach Chrissy the fundamentals of a traditional hula dance, which mostly involved a lot of enthusiastic but uncoordinated hip shaking. "Keep the rhythm, Chrissy. Imagine the waves," Furley commanded, his Hawaiian shirt unbuttoned halfway down his chest. "I learned this from a girl in Honolulu back in '62. She said I had the hips of a dolphin." "I think the dolphin had a better sense of timing, Ralph," Jack muttered, leaning over the professional-grade stove. He was searing scallops with a precision that belied the chaos behind him. The kitchen was his sanctuary. Here, the variables were controlled, the results predictable. But every time Janet walked by to grab a glass of wine, his focus wavered. "Need a hand, Jack?" Janet asked, leaning against the marble island. The moonlight from the deck caught the amber glints in her hair. Just the salt," Jack said, handing her the shaker. "And maybe a reality check. Did Larry mention there was a quiet professional involved?" Janet glanced toward the entryway. "He's still parking the car," which, in Larry speak, means he's probably trying to talk his way out of a speeding ticket or checking his reflection in a hubcap. The door finally opened, and a tall, sophisticated woman walked in. She wore an expensive white linen suit and carried a briefcase that cost more than Jack's car. This was clearly the business associate. "Excuse me," she said, her voice like cold silk, cutting through Furley's humming. "I was told I would be sharing this space with creative professionals." "I see a man in a Safari Reject shirt and a girl who appears to be having a seizure." "That's Hula, lady," Chrissy chirped, stopping mid-sway. "Want a lay?" Chapter 19. Moonlight on the Sand. Dinner was an exercise in strained politeness. The business associate, whose name was Victoria, spent the entire meal discussing international real estate, while Furley tried to convince her that his apartment building in Santa Monica was a hidden gem of the West Coast. Jack watched the way Janet laughed at Furley's jokes, a warm, genuine sound that made him wish he were the one telling them. After the plates were cleared, the house grew quiet. Victoria retreated to her room with her briefcase, and Furley fell asleep on the deck, a half-finished tropical drink still in his hand. Chrissy was in the living room, trying to figure out how to fold a beach towel into the shape of a swan. Jack stepped out onto the sand, the cool water of the incoming tide licking at his feet. "Looking for whales?" Janet's voice came from behind him. She was walking toward him, her footsteps silent on the damp sand. "Looking for a script that makes sense," Jack said, turning to face her. "Maybe the circus is what we're good at," Janet said, standing close enough that Jack could smell her soap, something clean and floral, like lavender. Jack looked down at her. The sea breeze was ruffling her hair, and for a moment the jokes were gone. There were no roommates, no landlords, and no Larry Dallas lies. There was just the sound of the ocean and the weight of everything they hadn't said since the night on the balcony. "Janet, about what happened, what I said before," Jack began, his voice dropping an octave. "Jack?" She looked up at him, her eyes searching his. He reached out, his hand hovering near her cheek, but before the distance could be closed, a frantic shout erupted from the house. "Jack! Janet! Help! The whale is in the kitchen." Chapter 20. The Great Malibu Misunderstanding. They rushed back to find Chrissy standing on the dining table, pointing a broom at a very small, very confused seal that had somehow wiggled through the open deck doors and was now inspecting Jack's leftover scallop sauce. "It's a baby whale," Chrissy screamed. "It's going to spray us with its blowhole." "It's a seal, Chrissy, and it's terrified," Janet cried, reaching for a towel. The commotion brought Victoria out of her room, her face a mask of aristocratic horror. "Is there a pinniped in the culinary area? This is a violation of every clause in my contract." Furley woke up with a start, fell out of his deck chair, and came charging in with a plastic lei gripped like a lasso. "Don't worry, ladies. I've handled wild beasts in the urban jungle. I'll wrangle him." The next 20 minutes were a blur of sliding on marble floors, Furley accidentally lassoing Victoria's briefcase, and Jack trying to lure the seal back to the ocean with a piece of cold salmon. Finally, with a soft slap 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 of flippers, the seal made its exit back to the surf, leaving behind a trail of seawater and several broken wine glasses. Victoria stood in the center of the wreckage, her linen suit stained with scallop sauce. "I am leaving. Now, I will be contacting the cousin, the boss, and possibly the Coast Guard." As she stormed out, Larry appeared in the doorway, holding a bag of ice and looking incredibly guilty. Chapter 21. The Anchors. By 2 a.m., the house was empty of everyone but the three of them. Larry had fled to a motel after Janet threatened him with the broom, and Furley had retired to his leopard print bed with a bag of frozen peas on his bruised ego. Jack, Janet, and Chrissy sat on the deck, their legs dangling over the edge, watching the waves. The glass and wood masterpiece was a mess, but the air was finally still. "You know," Chrissy said, leaning her head on Janet's shoulder, "I think I like the mountain shack better. At least there, the snakes didn't try to eat the salmon." "I don't know," Janet said, nudging Jack with her elbow. "The scallops were pretty good." Jack looked at them both. He was exhausted. His back ached from the hammock-induced soreness of the previous week, and he was pretty sure he had a seal-related stain on his favorite shirt. But as he looked at Janet, he saw her wink at him, a small, secret signal that the moment on the beach wasn't forgotten, just delayed. "We're a disaster," Jack laughed, the sound carrying over the surf. "We're a family," Janet corrected him. A loud, messy, itchy, seal-chasing family. Jack looked back at the house, then at the ocean. The scripts were always changing, the settings were always shifting, and Larry would inevitably find another paradise for them to ruin. But as long as he had these two to knock on his door, Jack Tripper knew he was exactly where he belonged. Chapter 22. The morning after the tide. The morning at Malibu arrived not with the gentle sound of waves, but with the frantic sound of a vacuum cleaner. Ralph Furley, in a desperate attempt to avoid a lawsuit from the cousin, was attacking the marble floors with a vigor usually reserved for his disco dancing. "The seal grease is everywhere," Furley shouted over the roar of the machine. "I've used 3 gallons of lemon-scented floor wax, and it still smells like a bait shop in here." Jack, nursing a cup of coffee that was far too weak for the occasion, watched him from the kitchen island. "Ralph, I think the seal grease is the least of your problems. Victoria mentioned the Coast Guard. I'm pretty sure that's a federal level of annoyance." Chrissy wandered in, still wearing her neon chartreuse swimsuit under a white bathrobe. "Does anyone know if seals like waffles? I feel bad that we chased him away without breakfast. He looked so hungry for that scallop sauce." "Chrissy, that seal is probably halfway to Catalina by now," Janet said, walking in with a stack of damp towels. "And if he has any sense, he's never coming near a kitchen again." The air was thick with the scent of lemon and salt, but beneath it all, there was a quiet, domestic rhythm. The chaos of the night before had, in a strange way, anchored them. They were no longer the creative professionals Larry had promised. They were just 3 roommates and their eccentric landlord, cleaning up the wreckage of another Larry Dallas special. Chapter 23. The Return to the Bistro.